Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, episode number 147 of Let's Go Racing. Tyler Jones, Dominic Callaghan here with you. So glad to have you with us. Coming up on today's show, we'll look back at the very eventful weekend that was, with a win for Christopher Bell in the rain-shortened Coca-Cola 600, the win in the Indianapolis 500 that we saw for Josef Newgarden for the second straight year, and the double / non-double, if you will, for Kyle Larson, his day that was stalled in Indianapolis, did get to run, but didn't make it to the Coke 600, and by the time he showed up, the race was over. We'll discuss all of that. Also, plenty to talk about in our news and notes with the shutdown of Stewart-Haas Racing. We'll look ahead to this weekend's race at Gateway there in St. Louis, and we'll get to your mailbag questions as well coming up at the end of today's show. Dominic, always a pleasure, my friend. Anytime we get a chance to do this show, but let's go ahead and just jump right to this because we got so much to talk about today. I don't want to waste a second more. First off, your reaction to Christopher Bell. Let's begin there. Getting the win, rain shortened. It seems like, Dom, like half the time when we have these rain shortened races, there's controversy about, was it the rightful winner? Did that guy really deserve to win? Whatever. Based on the way Christopher Bell had been running, I'm adamant to think that had that race gone 600 miles, Christopher Bell's probably winning that whole thing. I had no issue with them calling the race. I know it went long by the time they called it, but Sunday I think they found the rightful winner. What say you?
Yeah, and I think you're really onto a good point there, too, with the controversial part, because it's not necessarily the winner. It was more the fact that it kind of got dragged out. And you know that NASCAR will always make the best attempt they can to get that race, and they don't want to see this thing shortened just like anybody else. But the fact that it was not going to be a green flag or a resuming of the race till 1 a.m. and ending towards 3 a.m., they in my opinion, I think they made the right call to call that, because that's done with the fan in mind. And I know they have the jet dryers out there and the air titans. They're doing everything they can to get it happening, but you have other just forces and factors that are just outside of your control, like we saw with the humidity. And by the time it was going to get going back, yeah, it was a good call for NASCAR. But you're right, rightful winner Christopher Bell. We saw the dominance of Joe Gibbs Racing in the Coke 600. And I got to say, Tyler, too, I'm more and more impressed with what we're seeing with Ty Gibbs. Had Ty Gibbs won that race, I think we'd be saying the same thing, too, because Gibbs had the second most laps led in that race, winning the pole, dominating that first stage. A lot of good things that come out of that race. I think Brad Keselowski had said it post-race that he was just disappointed it was the Coke 350, not the Coke 600 with his second-place finish. Would have loved to see that thing play out, as all of us would have. But nonetheless, this weather just really, I guess pun intended, really did put a damper on everything this weekend, not just Charlotte.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going there. That was right in front of you. You couldn't resist. But yeah, good couple of weeks for Brad Keselowski. RFK Racing doing a really good job as of late, both the 6 and 17 team with how they've been running. But let's talk about Gibbs here for a second, Tom. Christopher Bell with the win, as you mentioned. Good run for Ty Gibbs here. That Joe Gibbs team, they clearly are the ones to beat the Hendrick camp. It is a continued theme of Hendrick versus Gibbs all year long, and that's not even to mention Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex, who we've also seen run well this year as well.
Sure, certainly. And even touching on Hamlin there for a second, he ran so well during the Coke 600, and just having that pit road speeding penalty. I don't know if you'd caught this, Tyler, but he had said over the radio, we're costing ourselves effing stage points. We're going to cost ourselves at least a couple of stage points opportunities here with this penalty, but nonetheless, some dominance there. And I got to say, too, on the whole Hendrick track, and I know we're going to talk about it more at great length, too, but what a shout-out performance there with Justin Allgaier, finishing 13th place, having to drop to the rear, and really just on standby on notice, could have been pulled from the car at any moment, ended up running what was the entirety of the race in that car, and rallied back to finish 13th. And I know we've said Justin Allgaier is kind of like a super sub, AJ Allmendinger, Josh Berry, a lot of these guys over the years, but Allgaier doing a really good job in that 5 car. Really showed, I think, how good the equipment is, and of course, how good the driver can be too, because to come from the back, make up a lot of positions like that, really stellar performance too. And yeah, Alex Bowman with another top 10, William Byron with the top 5, Chase Elliott inside the top 10 as well. It seems like it's been the theme of not only what we've talked about this year, but with this next gen era. The Gibbs and Hendrick camp seem to find their way to the top more often than not.
You mentioned Justin Allgaier. Quick shout out for him. I don't want to go too off topic here, but just for a quick second here while we're at it, Tom. You mentioned impressive run. We've seen what he's done in the Xfinity Series. He's been one of the best drivers of the Xfinity Series the last 4 or 5 years. I felt like he didn't get really a fair shot when he was full-time in the Cup Series, when he was running for Phoenix Racing, and that just debacle, that mess of a situation. I don't even know if Justin Allgaier wants to run full-time in Cup again, but I would love to see him get another shot. I don't think it would ever be at Hendrick necessarily, but if it's a team like Colleague or Rick Ware or something like that, I would love to see him get one more chance at being full-time in Cup and seeing how he can compete again, because he's proven he can compete. He just needs an opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. And even in those fill-in runs over the years, those are not really indicative of how good he could have run. Like when he did for Jimmy Johnson at Indianapolis in 2020, he ran the Talladega Fall race with Spire Motorsports, I believe, in 22. He's had some good opportunities. Maybe the finishes weren't there to really prove how well he could run. But and I'd be curious. I know we have a lot of loyal fans that listen in too that are connected to the industry. I feel like, and I would love for somebody to correct me and tell me I'm wrong in this, Tyler, but I feel like I've heard at some way time in the past that like Justin Allgaier has gotten so used to running the Xfinity Series, and I'm not using the word complacent, but he likes the schedule. He likes the Saturdays. He likes having those Sundays at home, and he's done it now the last 9 years, whatever it's been since he's joined JR Motorsports. I feel like the days of Justin Allgaier, unless it's a crazy great opportunity to run in Cup, are probably not going to happen, and I think he's okay with that based on that. Like I said, I feel like I've heard that sometime down the road before, that Justin Allgaier likes the schedule that he's running those Saturday races. He gets to have the rest of his weekend with his family, be at home typically most Sundays.
Yeah, and I would imagine he's getting compensated fairly well too, running for a top team like Junior Motorsports and competing for wins and everything, and still getting like these one-off opportunities like we saw this weekend. Justin Allgaier is in a good spot, good situation, and he's going to have that ride with Junior Motorsports really as long as he wants it. So, yeah, that's a good point. On the Gibbs factor with Christopher Bell, Dom, we've seen Christopher Bell, a playoff contender the last couple of seasons. With this win and the way that he dominated the way he did, even though it was shortened, we mentioned 350 miles here, I think we'd be remiss not to count Christopher Bell as a championship contender. I'll say this right now. He's my dark horse pick, if you will. I would not be surprised if come November we're talking about Christopher Bell as the NASCAR Cup Series champion in 2024.
It's not that far-fetched, Tyler. It's not an accident that he has made the Final Four the last 2 years. Now, what was an accident was that brake rotor issue at Phoenix last year and taking him out of the championship. But when you look at the overall season and how the team pieced together really good, solid performances with that Homestead Miami win and winning when it really, really counts, the 20 team can deliver when most teams cannot. And Christopher Bell is, I like the term dark horse, but I feel like championship contender really does suit him more so. And I know he's not fifth or third in points right now, but we've seen him run really well. He's already got one win in the bag before this with the Phoenix race in March, and they're returning there in November for the championship. So you got to imagine Christopher Bell and the team, they got to be sitting really well right now. You have at least 10 playoff points now with the wins. I don't know how many stage wins he's gotten on the season offhand, but you got to imagine you start climbing top 10 in points, and there's more incentive to finish higher in the regular season to get those playoff points. I feel like this number 20 team is getting hot at the right time.
I agree. I think you're 100% on with that. Let's talk Kyle Larson now, the man of the hour. We saw his statement, what he said afterwards, that it was one of the worst days of his racing career. And I felt so crushed for him, Dom, because it should have been one of the best days of his racing career. Get the opportunity to do the double. And, the rain pushes back the Indy 500. I thought they weren't even going to race the Indy 500 Sunday. I thought they'd push it back to Monday, but the clouds cleared. I'm not blaming Indy at all. Like, you got 300,000 fans there. Like, you owe it to them to make an effort to get that race in. They made the right call to get the race in. But for Kyle's sake, that cut off his chances of running in the Coke 600. obviously he shows up and the race is under, the caution, ultimately under red flag. I think NASCAR, the reason why they waited so long to call the race was they were hoping to get Kyle Larson in that race car and get people to watch to see Kyle Larson attempt that double. I think that's why they waited so long to call it the way that they did. But even with that said, for Kyle Larson here, the race itself, the Indy 500, he was running really good. We saw the speed that Arrow McLaren had. They were some of the fastest cars out there. If he doesn't have that pit road speeding penalty, Dom, Kyle Larson very well could have won on Sunday. He could have been the Indy 500 champion. He had the speed to do it. And for the race to get delayed and not make it to the Coke 600, I felt so bad because luck just was not on his side Sunday. I mean, he could have won the Indy 500, and who knows, he could have had a great run and maybe even won the Coke 600 had weather cooperated.
No, certainly. And just one of those things that you can plan all you want. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard the joke before, Tyler. You want to make God laugh? Tell him your plans. And this had been in place for over a year, and there's just sometimes external forces that just don't make it happen. But no, nonetheless, I agree with you. You read that statement, and you can feel like there were probably tears rolling down his face as he was typing that statement out. Well, even if there was a PR team that helped him craft that together, it felt genuine. And man, to go from the highest of highs to not knowing when you're going to race to racing, and Rick Hendrick making that call to keep Kyle Larson out there. They said they had invested too much in this opportunity to not see it through. I think they made the great call there. And I think Bob Potters, friend of the show, say something about, that they wouldn't have made that call if they didn't think they were going to be getting that waiver. So at the time of this taping, we really haven't heard too much of that. So that could change later this week, but gotta imagine Kyle Larson gets that waiver, and they wouldn't have had him run that Indianapolis 500 knowing that NASCAR is the focus and the priority if NASCAR wasn't willing to work with him. And I feel like NASCAR is going to work with Kyle Larson. Now, Tyler, I don't think
along those lines, Dom, let me add this. In the lead up, we had heard Kyle Larson and Team Hendrick say, Coke 600 is the priority. We're prioritizing the Coke 600. We're running for a championship there. We did not hear anything different until the morning of the Indy 500. Something tells me that something changed, whether it was Rick Hendrick in contact with somebody with NASCAR or some reassurance they got. Maybe it wasn't in writing just yet. But, I mean, we know Rick Hendrick's got a lot of pull. He's the most powerful owner in the sport, and you got Jeff Gordon there. And they may even say to ourselves, like, they're not going to kick Kyle out of the playoff when he's already got a couple wins, like calling NASCAR's bluff, if you will. But something had to have changed, I think, for them to change their tune. The fact they didn't say that till Sunday.
Exactly. And I think it lends to the conversation that maybe we'll find out later on that, yes, NASCAR is okay with it. And they've been pretty strict on it, because we've seen in the past, another friend of the show, Grant Enfinger, missed a race, I believe in 21 or 22 because of lack of sponsorship, and NASCAR would not give him a waiver because he had to sit out a race, not of his own doing, out of his control. But then again, one of these situations too, I think NASCAR looks at these on a case-by-case basis, Tyler. They know the intent. I don't want to say they're the judge and jury here, but you can really tell somebody's intent. Kyle Larson had the intent to run 1,100 miles on Sunday. Had weather played out, we know that would have happened, but I feel like NASCAR has to look at the intent. Was the intent there to make it back? And I think by him making that flight, knowing he was still not going to get credited with the start, that he was still willing to take over the number 5 car when the race, or if the race was going to resume.
Wasn't getting any points either.
Exactly. So there's intent there. He still had the intention to run that car. I feel like that has to count for something.
I do too. And Dom, of Kyle running the Indy 500, wasn't the biggest beneficiary of all of it NASCAR? All the publicity that NASCAR got, all the promotion that they got out of their star running IndyCar. I mean, I saw Ryan McGee post a photo pre-race that said he's never seen so much media and people around one driver at the Indy 500 than what Kyle Larson had around him. And it's not like they have any worry of Kyle Larson leaving NASCAR for IndyCar. He's a NASCAR guy through and through. There's a whole lot more money in NASCAR than IndyCar, quite frankly, here. At the end of the day, it was better, I would argue, Dom, for NASCAR that Kyle Larson run the Indy 500 than it would have been had he run the Coke 600 and skipped Indy.
Total agreement there, because that's publicity at the end of the day, and it's bringing more eyeballs to NASCAR and the potential of bringing maybe some more IndyCar fans or some dirt racing fans, that people that follow Kyle Larson are wanting to see how the rest of that day plays out. Absolutely. Had the weather cooperated, we'd be talking totally different circumstances. But I go back to the intent. Kyle Larson's intention was to run all 1,100 miles. It's not like he was getting out of that IndyCar race car and just scooping ice cream and calling it a day and having a good family affair in the evening. He was going to hop behind the wheel of the number 5 car, run 600 more miles. And I feel like NASCAR does have flexibility in the rule book, and I feel like they will, maybe cater's not the right word, but they will work with Hendrick Motorsports and Kyle Larson. Just like had it been anybody else in these circumstances, you bet you they would have worked with Kurt Busch in 2014. Had something like this happen 10 years ago and he attempted the double, or Robbie Gordon, or however the case may have been 20 years ago if the system was in place. NASCAR knows it's good publicity. This would be a bad thing if they don't give him the waiver.
Yeah, and we've seen guys get waivers when they've been suspended before and still get the opportunity to make the playoffs. So I think NASCAR would be crazy to not give him the waiver. He's already earned a playoff spot as is. And the 5 car was still out there. Justin Allgaier, we mentioned, had a good run, finished 13th. So, yeah, to me, this is an easy call. This shouldn't even be a controversy, Dom.
No, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. But, a great conversation. And let's play a little bit of the devil's advocate here, Tyler. If you were on the other side of this conversation and trying to argue to not give Kyle Larson the waiver, what would be the reasons? I mean, we've talked about, of course, NASCAR is likely going to do that. But what would be the reasons to shun Kyle Larson? What would be things that could come of that?
I think the number one reason would be the narc argument, if you will, of sticking by your rule book, enforcing your rules, that every driver has to start every race to make the playoff. But even that argument, Dom, I would say is a farce because of NASCAR's track record of giving out waivers.
Eric Jones is a great example. Granted, that's an injury, but that happened this year, and he has a waiver. We've seen over the years, since this playoff format has been installed 11 seasons ago, that is, that there have been waivers granted for everything. We could argue here if Kyle Busch is the Mickey Mouse champion from 2015 because he missed the first 11 races, but nope, he's played by the rules, got the waiver. Same with Chase Elliott last year, in intentionally wrecking a driver and still coming back and having a shot to make the playoffs, and NASCAR granting the waiver the way they did. So I think he gets the waiver.
Right. I mean, this is not like golf, okay, where guys are intentionally taking weeks off here. This was a matter of circumstance, the way that it unfolded. It wasn't like he was sitting on his couch doing nothing. Like, he was still competing, and promoting the sport of NASCAR. So, no, I think that's an easy call to give him the waiver and go from there. Going forward, though, Dom, I'll say this. Aren't you glad that Kyle signed a 2-year contract to do this? I imagine Kyle was thrilled. He signed a 2-year contract to do this with Arrow McLaren and Hendrick Motorsports, that they get a second shot at this next year to run the Indy 500, run the Coke 600 the same day. Hopefully the weather cooperates and all that. To me, that makes even next year, like, if he would have done it this year and it happened next year, then we would have been sitting ourselves like, oh, I've already seen that. Like, okay, cool, Kyle's going to do it again. Now the anticipation, I think, builds even more than it was this year, Dom, because we've seen that Kyle can compete, that he can go out there and he can win the Indy 500 and another year under his belt. And both races, like, to me, I'm even more excited about next year than I was about this year. And I was pretty excited about this. I called it Kyle Larson Day. It's going to be Kyle Larson Day again next year.
It's going to be Kyle Larson year. The way you bring it up, you got a great point there. You have another year to build up the anticipation, the publicity. I know Kyle Larson had said that he had a little crew following him around to document it and make a little documentary out of this. To be a part 2 on this. I'm looking forward to the part 2. And who wins on this again? Going back to what you said a few minutes ago, is NASCAR. NASCAR is going to get more publicity out of something like this. And of course, the IndyCar series will as well. This is going to be something to hype up even more. Like, even the element of weather. It's like watching a real life soap opera with unnecessary drama play out in front of our eyes here over the next year.
So here's something to think about too, Dom, as far as next year goes. Just looking ahead, we know that the Coke 600 is going to be on Prime Video next year. And the Coke 600, Coke 600 is going to be on Prime Video. And the Indy 500 is they're in negotiations. It could be on Fox. It could be on NBC. That sounds like the favorites here. But I wouldn't be surprised if there is more collaborative effort, if you will, with knowing the negotiations with IndyCar of, hey, we're going to do everything we can to make this as seamless and easy as possible for Kyle Larson to run both these races. I mean, Dom, had Kyle Larson run the Indy 500 on schedule, I believe, I mean, heck, we saw in the All-Star race just a week ago. Had Kyle needed 15 or 30 or maybe even 45 minutes to get to Charlotte, they would have given him all the time he needed to wait to start that Coke 600. I think that NASCAR is going to do everything they can to help out Kyle Larson in the future and when he does this.
The competitors are all for that too. And you heard the comments with Hamlin and Logano, because last they'd be for. They just don't know how long is the right time to wait for something like that. You know who would know that answer is the broadcast partners, because the broadcast partners have a lot more say and a lot more leverage. They talk to the sanctioning bodies with IndyCar and NASCAR, and this happens again next year. You know, there's going to be a lot more collaborative effort. It's a great point to bring up too, because who wouldn't want to see this happen? It makes great publicity for everybody. The sanctioning bodies win the biggest in the end. And plus the broadcast partners do too. A lot of good talking points. People to look forward to tuning into the broadcast even more so. That could be a bump in ratings. I don't see any lose here, Tyler. It sounds like more like wins in the win column for everybody.
I think so. I haven't seen the TV ratings for the Coke 600 yet, but this was the highest rated Indy 500 in a long time. Over 5 million people watched this year. I mean, that's the Kyle Larson effect. That's all because of Kyle Larson, of why they watched. And I'll say this too, one more point. We've talked so much about Kyle in this. The race itself, Dom, even when Kyle was out of contention, really good race. IndyCar put on a show. I mean, the Indy 500 always is a great race. Their cars, I hate to admit it, are so much better than NASCAR's at Indy, but that's their house. That's their wheelhouse. But Josef Newgarden with that last lap pass there, I mean, that was an awesome finish. I mean, that race, even with Kyle out of contention, it delivered a great race there.
Oh, it sure did. It sure did. I believe he had Simon Pagenaud, former winner of the race, too, kind of working as his driver coach. He's been out, too, with his concussion stuff. But, man, what a great show. What a great show with IndyCar. And, man, you could tell the nerves were up, too, with that first lap, first corner crash and taking out 3 or 4 cars like it did. And, like, even just the parity you saw with IndyCar with Stingray Robb and Connor Daly, a lot of guys you typically wouldn't see up front leading laps and running up in the podium, top 5. Really, really cool to see.
By the way, I was shocked to learn that Stingray Robb is his actual name.
Yes, it kind of sounds like when you hear on the broadcast Stevie Ray Vaughan. It's Stingray Robb. It's pretty cool.
I thought immediately when I heard that name, there's no way that's his real name. And then did a quick Google search. Like, no, his mother and father named him Stingray Robb. Like, that's badass.
That is a badass name. So to be having that name since birth, I'm sure you hear a lot of times about people being made fun of for the names they had in school. I'm sure he actually got praised for that name without knowing the guy or knowing his story.
It's not like it was his middle name or something. No, that is his first and last name, Stingray Robb. Awesome racer.
Stingray Robb.
That's right up there with Dick Trickle, as far as all-time names go. Dom, looking ahead of this week at Gateway. We have not been running there very long in the NASCAR Cup Series. This was a track that was on the schedule for a long time for Xfinity and Truck. Went away, came back with this Cup date here at the end of May, beginning of June here, and it's been very successful. It's sold out every year. It's put on a good race the last couple years. NASCAR has made a commitment to the Midwest with 2 Kansas races, this St. Louis race, Chicago Street Race. We know about Michigan and such. Iowa's getting a race, of course, this year as well. I would consider this, Dom, even before going into this weekend, even NASCAR's commitment to the Midwest and what they've done here in St. Louis has been a smashing success.
Oh, certainly, certainly, and they're back for the third straight year. This track was added with the next gen era in 2022, and man, we know people that go cover that race a week and friends of the show, and man, they've told us you can just feel the excitement, the environment, and even though rain hampered the race there too last year and kind of cut that a little bit short, still the fans stayed out there. I believe it was a 6-hour delay. You could tell there were fans really committed to staying out there and seeing however this was going to play out and how it was going to finish, that they wanted to be a part of the action and witness some NASCAR racing. And it's a cool track from what it looks like. I look forward to going out there someday, Tyler. Have you ever been?
I have not. I've been to St. Louis many times, but I've never been to this racetrack. And that's a market that you talk about bringing fans from all over. You're not far from Chicago, not far from Kansas City. St. Louis, a big city in itself, and they got the Cardinals, of course, and the St. Louis Blues, the NHL team. But only two sports for that market. This is a big deal for them, Dom, for a city of its size to have this NASCAR race. They certainly have embraced it the last couple of years because they don't get events like this too often. I think NASCAR found the perfect market for what they were looking for here.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to, like, you can tell the fans are really into it with how they show up in droves to the track. And you hear about the positive experiences people have at Gateway or Worldwide Technology Raceway, as it's called. And you, plus too, I think you have a good influence with the Wallace brothers and Rusty, Kenny, Mike being from that area and that connection that they have to the sport and their home track, if you will, now. And I know Kenny Wallace really speaks highly of the track as well in itself. And really cool to see the environment out there. Again, that's why I say I want to go to a track, to a race out there at the track. There, Nashville, Martinsville, those are probably on my short list of tracks to still get to before it's all said and done. But I think, especially we'll have to see how the forecast plays out over the next few days. But man, we are in for some good racing. Like if the race can go like how we saw in 2022, that full distance going to overtime, maybe not even an overtime finish, Tyler, there are some really, really good chances to see some good racing this upcoming weekend. A lot of passing that you see at Gateway. Kyle Busch says, too, I remember him saying that it's a very interesting track because you're approaching the corners different, and it may look like it's the same kind of track, but you're approaching each turn different. Turns 1 and turns 3 a lot different. It really puts it in the driver's hands.
Yeah, it certainly does. Real quick on this point here, Dom, what are you watching for this week? I'm specifically watching for the Fords. We've seen them run better the last couple of weeks. Obviously, Keselowski ended the losing streak a few weeks ago. They're at Darlington. For me, I want to see if Ford can continue to build that momentum, especially everything that's going on at Stewart-Haas. We'll talk about that here in just a bit as well. But for me, that's what I want to see. And Ford's won here before in the past. Joey Logano won the first ever race here. Can Ford keep up the momentum and get back to victory lane again? That's what's got my attention. What's got your attention this week?
Great points to bring up there, too. And I think, too, Kyle Busch made some good comments, too. And I go back to that, but I really take a lot of what he has to say to heart when it comes to that credibility as a racer, that this track really races like a mile and a half, and that you might see a lot of what you've seen on those characteristics with mile and a half races this year play out at Gateway. And I feel like, with that being said, based on what we've seen, Tyler, I feel like Fords are going to have everybody's number in qualifying. It feels like Ford, mile and a half, super speedways, they've been great when it comes to qualifying. But I feel like when we see that long run speed, that plays to the Chevrolet and Toyota teams, more specifically, like we talked about at the top of the show, with Hendrick and with Gibbs. So I feel like we might see some Team Penske come to life, a little bit of Front Row Motorsports, but I feel like those are the Ford guys we'll see make any kind of noise if they do. But otherwise, that winning driver is going to come out of the Hendrick or Gibbs camp.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll get to our news and notes segment coming up in a bit. Also got our mailbag at the end of the show as well. But Dom, we had to start with the elephant in the room, the collapse of Stewart-Haas Racing. For folks that may not know, kind of explain the situation that's unfolded here.
Sure. So a lot of uncertainty had been going around with what was going to happen with Stewart-Haas Racing, with reports coming out from Adam Stern of the Sports Business Journal, friend of the show, that the whole team, the whole operation could be up for sale. And the team confirmed on Tuesday, May 28th, in a big staff meeting, if you will, at the Stewart-Haas Racing headquarters. Everybody was briefed on the fact that the team will be, in fact, sold off completely by the end of the 2024 NASCAR season, and that includes the NASCAR Cup Series and Xfinity Series operations. So you have 4 teams in Cup. You have the full-time 2 entries with Cole Custer and Riley Herbst in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. But more importantly, Tyler, when you look at the numbers, I mean, it's one thing to look at the drivers and think what's going to happen there, but these are 300 people that have families that work for these operations and has worked for the team. And you got to imagine there's probably been people that have been with the team since 2009 that are working for this organization. But with the team faltering at the end of the year, the charters to be sold off, it will end a run of a team that has had over 60 NASCAR Cup Series wins. I believe it's 68 or 69 wins to date, with 2 NASCAR Cup Series championships and an Xfinity Series title to that name as well. So certainly the end of a powerhouse that never really got started, Tyler.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I mean, and how things fell apart so quickly, Dom. I mean, 2020, we were talking about about Kevin Harvick going out there and just dominating. What was it, 8 races that year? He was fantastic. And then, had a down year in 2021, 2022, he got back in victory lane, had 2 wins. And then last year, that team and Stewart-Haas Racing never really put it together, and they went winless for the entire year as a company last year. And you lose the major sponsors, Anheuser-Busch, Hunt Brothers Pizza, Smithfield, all just kind of walk out the door. And the drivers they brought in, nobody was anything to write home about. I mean, Josh Berry, a rookie driver, a 30-plus-year-old rookie. Nothing against Josh Berry, but let's just be honest here. You bring in Noah Gragson, who probably wasn't their first choice, but he had some funding behind him. And then, Chase Briscoe and Ryan Preece just haven't run that great either over the years. So it's unfortunate. It's sad. I'm not surprised by this news, but to me, it's twofold, right? Yes, it's bad business. It's unfortunate luck that they lost the major sponsors that they did. But on the flip side too, Dom, there's got to be some responsibility involved here. I don't think Tony Stewart, and don't get me wrong, I love Tony. I've interviewed Tony, met Tony, great guy. I don't think Tony was invested the way he should have been. I don't think Gene Haas was invested the way he should have been. And they got other things going on. Gene's got his F1 team. Tony's got his NHRA team. Tony's trying to start a family and all this. To me, I think it's twofold. I don't think that they cared enough, but I think that they had some unfortunate luck when it came to the business side too. I think 2 things can be true here.
Certainly, and it's a demise over the course of 4 or 5 years with a lot of things with implosion, man, because there's other factors too. From what I've been told from people that would have more of the insight on those things, and I think you've been privy to some of these conversations too. Tony Stewart was devastated that Ford wouldn't back Kyle Larson, and when his suspension happened and he gets released in 2020 and he's trying to come back to NASCAR in 2021, Tony Stewart went to bat for Kyle Larson and wanted him a part of the Stewart-Haas Racing camp.
Yeah, that was Kyle's first choice, was not to go to Hendrick. It was to go to Stewart-Haas.
It was to go to Stewart-Haas Racing. And for the not blessing that they got from Ford to not make that happen, I think was a crushing blow to Tony Stewart and the whole organization. And I got to fast forward to even a couple weeks ago at the All-Star race when they were doing practice and Kevin Harvick has the media availability. Somebody had asked him in one of the press conferences, what differences do you notice Hendrick, Stewart-Haas being back behind the wheel, all that? And I don't even know if he was trying to take a jab. He was just saying the truth, Tyler, that it was nice to see his team owner twice in the last 2 weeks. And I thought, he's taking a jab there at Gene Haas, just not really knowing the rest of the story. But it sounds like that's probably a jab at both of his team owners. We don't see Tony at the track. We don't see Gene Haas at the track anymore. And you got to figure, adding to that with Gene Haas, you own one of the largest CNC machinery companies in the world. That's going to take your time. The F1 operation is certainly taking his time. Tony Stewart, with all of his endeavors, there's just not enough hours and time in a day. And it seems like the leadership, when you don't have leaders that are there consistently or there to right the ship, you get people that are trying to figure it out themselves. And this is the result that you get. I'm not saying that those people that that are working at Stewart-Haas Racing. They're very capable people. They're professionals. They know what they're doing, but you still need leadership. I don't care what industry you're in. You still need leaders riding the ship. And when your leaders are not there, it's a telltale sign. That's a big morale drop. And that is just a ripple effect that we have seen at Stewart-Haas Racing.
And I
So
would
many
say this
factors on that, Tyler.
I'd say this too, Dom. Like some people are going to point to and say, hey, other sports, some of the best owners are the hands-off owners, the ones that are just writing the checks and letting the team run itself. But Dom, in the history of this sport, that's never been a recipe for success. The best teams in this sport, this isn't football, this isn't the NBA. The best teams have always been the owners that were the most active, that were actively involved, helping find sponsors, putting the best crews together, the best talent out there. It reminds me very much of Evernham's collapse. You know, that team, when Ray wasn't around, that's when that team started to fall apart and, you know, became a shade of its former self here. You have to be in this sport, you have to be invested as an owner and show that you give a shit.
And what a difference it makes when you have Rick Hendrick at the track for qualifying and practice. And when he cannot be at the track, he has is Jeff Andrews or Jeff Gordon there as a representative for him. And Joe Gibbs, the coach, they're at the track every single weekend. They're with his guys and his teams. And he'd have, honestly, Tyler, with what that man has gone through in the last 7-8 years on the personal side of things, he'd have a lot of reasons to not want to be at the track or need to be at the track. But that shows leadership. And just kind of a little inside story, maybe you've noticed this over the years, but you have Coach Joe Gibbs at the track on a Saturday or Sunday, and I'd be curious if any other fans have noticed this, but Gibbs is so to the point where you know where his cars are, what he's going to have at the track because of his polos, Tyler, down to individual polos made. I believe these are probably unique one-off polos he wears Saturdays and Sundays because he has all the primary sponsors, 2 logos on the left chest, 2 logos on the right chest. And they are polos that match what the cars are on the track that week. And that may not sound like a big detail, but when you talk about the leadership, you talk about circling back to who's at the track and things, the little things that make the big differences, that to me has always struck me, Tyler. That has gone a long way. The fact that they're that meticulous with the details that your leader is wearing the partners of all of who's on the track that day at the Speedway, that to me says just a little bit to the lot of character that Joe Gibbs is as a leader.
Well, and you guys know the tough pill to swallow meme. I'm going to use this here, Dom. Here's the truth of the matter. Tough pill to swallow here. It didn't have to be this way. Stewart-Haas could have very easily been saved, could have been a thriving championship caliber organization, but it was mismanaged and they had bad business involved here. They made some dumb decisions. It didn't have to be this way, Dom. Stewart-Haas, you know, and sure, there's some factors that were beyond their control. That's totally understandable. But this was avoidable. There's no excuse why Stewart-Haas should not be sitting here thriving heading into 2025.
I agree with you so much. And I'll make another meme joke here. I feel like Kevin Harvick probably was complaining on back issues the last few years because of carrying the Stewart-Haas operation on his back the way he did. Look at how well he was. Look, even how he ran in 24 or 23, Tyler. Yes, Harvick didn't win a race. Could have probably won 2 races when you go back and look at the races that he ran really well. I mean, he had a lot of raw speed, but I feel like Josh Berry wouldn't have done that. And Josh Berry's one heck of a talent. But Josh Berry wouldn't have had 17 top 10 finishes like Kevin Harvick did last year. Kevin Harvick really, really outdrove the equipment that he was in. Not to the Kurt Busch Phoenix Racing wrecking the equipment, over driving it like that. No, but Kevin Harvick knew how to maximize his equipment at Stewart-Haas Racing. And a lot of these rule changes, things happened over the years, but I really feel like the team continued to shine and look so good because of what Kevin Harvick could do behind the wheel. And now we're seeing that last missing piece of what was making Stewart-Haas Racing great is no longer there. And man, it did not have to end this way. It could have been a lot more thriving of an operation, but you got to give a crap if you're running a team like that. You can't be hands off in NASCAR. You said it best.
Let's talk about the charters, then we'll talk about the drivers of where they go forward. Bob Pockris reporting the expectation is that Trackhouse, 2311, and Front Row will each get one of the three charters, and that the fourth one is still to be determined of where it will go. Dom, I would lean towards Ford probably is going to be aggressive of not losing too many of these charters, because if Trackhouse or 2311 or some of these others take these charters, that's less Ford cars on the track. It sounded like Ford didn't want to do a deal with Stewart-Haas Racing, that they couldn't come to terms for 2025 and beyond. That was a big part of why this fell apart the way it did. But I can't imagine Ford wants to see four more competitors out there. I would think that I agree with Bob. I think those three happen. I think 2311 gets one. I think Trackhouse gets one. Front Row gets one. But I think that other one goes to Roush Fenway. They've made it known they want to buy a third charter. Maybe they keep a guy like Chase Briscoe or something in that. We'll talk about the drivers here just a bit. But then, like, it doesn't make the bleeding feel as bad if you're Ford, Dom, if of those four, two of them go to Ford teams. I think that's the most likely scenario here.
That could happen from a manufacturer and OEM standpoint. You don't want to have more of your competition out there, absolutely. But it also makes you wonder too, Tyler, if you're on the outside looking in, and I know we've seen so many of these things play out, like how we did with Michael Jordan, Pitbull, some of these celebrity owners come into the sport, whether they be in majority or minority stake ownership roles. But if you're looking on the outside looking in, I mean, is there names you heard? Are there people that catch your attention that we're not even talking about right now, that are not even maybe necessarily on the radar for most people that are looking at this charter situation thinking it's a good opportunity to enter the sport now?
I think the Andretti's is the obvious one. Obviously, they got rejected by F1 recently, and now that's turned into a congressional battle. They got Congress on their side fighting for them, and they've made it known they want to get into NASCAR. But with the Gainbridge thing and Spire, sounds like there's a partnership there. I think more likely with Andretti, instead of starting a team from scratch, I think they're likely to buy out Spire or buy a percentage of Spire at some point in time. And obviously Marco's been driving for Spire in the truck series. Junior's name's been mentioned, but I think the price tag is a bit too high for him as a potential owner there. But those are kind of the ones on the outside that come to mind potentially. I think that's one thing I'll say, in the past, Dom, in this situation, these four charters, that's four less competitors on the racetrack in the old system. The charter system at least is giving some value to NASCAR and to Tony Stewart here. I mean, just because Stewart-Haas isn't going away, we're still going to see the same number of cars on the racetrack next year. That won't change.
Sure. No, absolutely. It just makes you wonder who else could step up. Like we had saw where Mari Gallagher stepped up years ago, and they moved their truck and Xfinity operation to Cup and then shut all that stuff down too. Could we see something like that? Like we have an AM Racing. We have MBM Motorsports in the Xfinity series. We have Thor Sport and Trucks. Any of those as potential candidates, if Ford's really wanting to keep a piece of the Ford pie in Cup, maybe one of these operations has a promotion within and they take their operation to the Cup Series as a full-time venture. Likely, unlikely? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I could see that. One thing I would say about that, though, Dom, is that it is, for teams that have moved up, it's looking a lot harder than they thought. Like Legacy Motor Club, it is, of course, Maury Gallagher behind that, used to be Petty GMS. It has been a struggle for them. Even this year, going to Toyota and everything, they've had their problems. Colleague Racing, all that trophy hunting. I mean, they found what, 2 trophies? And ever in the Cup Series, and their Xfinity program sucks now. I mean, you look at Trackhouse in 2311, both those teams, they didn't have a prior program in Xfinity or truck. You know what they had? Cash. that's for them. And they started competing at a high level. So the promotion thing, it sounds nice in theory, like, hey, we're going to start this truck team. We're going to start this Xfinity team and work our way up to Cup. But as nice as that sounds in theory, the reality is it comes down to who's got the most money. And 2311 and And Trackhouse, the big reason why they're successful is they got more money than anybody, and they got more corporate backing behind them than anybody as well.
Sure. It's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out over the next few months. But man, silly season, Tyler, we're always talking, oh, this is a crazy silly season, or we didn't expect this, but my gosh, this is probably the earliest we are seeing silly season play out for the next year already.
Yeah. So what about those 4 drivers of where they could potentially go? I know that Briscoe's name has come up for the 21 car. Wood Brothers also been mentioned at Roush. Then you have, of course, is the Ford family going to keep these guys around too? Where do they potentially go from here, Dom? Like I look at those guys, I think Noah, Chase, and Josh Berry will all have cup rides next year. Ryan Preece, I think there's a good chance he's the odd man out, gets bumped to the Xfinity or Truck Series. What do you think happens with those 4 guys?
Great point. There's a lot to dissect on it. So let's start with Josh Berry. So driving the number 4 car, Kevin Harvick's heir apparent, and we're only going to see 1 year of this happen. But Josh Berry finally gets that big lucky break. Look, winning solves a lot of things. It's probably going to take a win for Josh Berry to stay in a Cup Series race, because Tony Stewart was a big believer in Josh Berry. Rick Hendrick certainly was too. There's no room at Hendrick right now for what they have going on. And I just don't know where Josh Berry.
Let me stop you on that. Are we sure Alex Bowman's hanging on that 48? Do you think Hendrick could take this as an opportunity to move on from Alex and put Josh Berry in that car?
They certainly could. Alex Bowman's having a great season, but quite great seasons don't get it done at Hendrick Motorsports, as we know. So they want drivers leading laps.
If you're Rick Hendrick right now, I would rather have Josh Berry than I would Alex Bowman.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you on that. So unless that Hendrick Motorsports opportunity works out, I feel like Berry's options are tough. Maybe Front Row Motorsports with the opening with Michael McDowell. You mentioned Dale Earnhardt Jr. earlier on in the show. Maybe he's not too spooked by the numbers. Maybe he gets some investors. Maybe he gets in the charter conversation. I feel like there's a lot of options opening there too. I feel like a Dale Jr. reuniting with some of those drivers could play into that. And I think that's where Noah Gragson comes into this picture. So the driver of the 10 car, he's going to get that 1 year. And let's be honest, he's the best Stewart-Haas Racing guy right now. And let's just call it what it is. He's up front, earning stage points, more top 10 finishes, and the points don't show it because of his penalty early in the year. But man, Noah Gragson looks really good right now. So he's shaping himself up to look, hey, look, I'm Cup. I'm relevant. I am Cup material. Maybe JR Motorsports takes a chance if they get a charter. That's a wild, far-fetched theory, though. Perhaps that Front Row Motorsports charter works into that play there. Chase Briscoe brings up a good driver here, too. You talk about the Wood Brothers thing. We know Harrison Burton is likely not returning to that car next year. Could be a good fit there if RFK Racing potentially gets that charter. We're looking maybe at Chase Briscoe reuniting at RFK, because Chase Briscoe did run that 60 car in the twilight days of the RFK NASCAR Xfinity Series program before he took off with Fred Biaggi and the Stewart-Haas camp. So there is a little bit of bridges still there. I don't believe those bridges have been burned at all. So that could potentially be an opportunity. And man, Ryan Preece is probably the biggest question mark. Again, Tyler, winning solves a lot of things. Winning can do a lot of great things and erase a lot of doubts and make you more marketable. We saw that with Ryan Preece at Nashville in the Truck Series in 22 and getting that Cup ride in 23 and continuing into this year. But again, with no Tony Stewart in the picture anymore, going to bat for him like he did, I just don't know what's going to happen here with Ryan Preece. He's probably the biggest question mark, the biggest variable. And I feel like of all the drivers we're mentioning, unless he wins a race, Tyler, we're not going to see Ryan Preece in Cup next year.
Well, and one more thing I'll bring up on this, Dom, is that you look at this situation for all 4 of these drivers and all 4 of these teams here, and you would normally think to yourself, like, wow, they're losing their jobs. They don't really have much incentive, motivation. That's actually not the case. Like, all these drivers have a chip on their shoulder, knowing they're racing for jobs for next year. These teams trying to, get jobs next year and everything, and be on not just have a job, but be on a competitive team here. Even though this team's shutting down, they have everything to prove over these next few months of why they deserve a seat at the table here. I expect, Stewart-Haas Racing, I know performance hasn't been great, but I think they're going to put their best foot forward over these next few months, because literally everybody in that company is laying everything out in the line here to try to have something for next year.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You still race with that one goal in mind to go win, collect trophies, to try and be the best you can on the track. Just that human, I don't know what you call it, maybe the human trait we all have in common, where we just want to go and win. You want to be the best at which you can be. And here's that opportunity to go prove it. It's a lame duck year. Everybody knows what's going to be happening over the next 5-6 months. All the talk, all the outside talk. But what can they all do behind the wheel? The men and women at the shop, everybody at the racetrack. Because it really is a team effort, it's a team sport. What all plays out over the next few months, Tyler, it's going to be fascinating to see. And I feel like a lot of these guys, down to the drivers and back to that point, they are racing for jobs. This is their tryout. This is a chance to pad their resume, their racing resumes, to where they can go next. Who's going to have the best opportunities come November?
Yeah, if you find a way to get in victory lane not once but twice, you're getting a really good ride next year. Something's going to happen. Somebody will move some mountains to get you a good ride. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. Don, what else we got going on news and notes wise?
So news and notes wise, as we move towards the Enjoy Illinois 300 this weekend, let's take a look at some of the odds for some of the sports books, varying from DraftKings, BetMGM, Caesars Sportsbook, and more. If you had to guess, Tyler, who do you think the odds-on favorite is for the race on Sunday?
I'm going to go Kyle Larson.
And what do you think his odds are?
Maybe minus 400.
Plus 600, plus 6 to 1 is what some of the sports books are having.
Yes, plus 400.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, he's second best. Denny Hamlin is your odds-on favorite for the Enjoy Illinois 300 this weekend at Gateway. And just kind of looking at through some of the field here, you have Larson at 6 to 1, William Byron at teetering about 8 or 9 to 1, Brian Blaney at 8 to 1, Martin Truex Jr. sitting at 8.5 to 1 as well. Last week's winner at the Coast 600, Christopher Bell, sitting at 10 to 1. Perhaps a first-time winner. If you were to bet on Ty Gibbs, it would be a 12 to 1 bet at opening odds. Your last year's winner in the race, Kyle Busch, sitting at 15 to 1. Joey Logano, the inaugural winner at Gateway, sitting at 14 to 1. And some of the long shots include Chase Briscoe, sitting at 60 to 1. Daniel Suarez, sitting at 100 to 1, Tyler.
All right. Dom, I think Kyle Larson is going to come in so hungry after what happened this past week with a chip on his shoulder. I want to be a man in his way this week. I think this is. I'm putting a blood bank guarantee on this. Like I will give away some of my blood if Kyle Larson doesn't win this week. I think that he is going to be a will man, determined to get in victory lane on Sunday. That's my pick. How about you?
That's how confident he is, guys, is that if he wins, he will give away some of his blood. It's noted here on this show, episode 147.
I will donate blood if I am not right.
I love it. I love it. Kyle Larson, I think is a solid pick, Tyler, and I think Kyle Larson will get the job done this weekend. Pick that third win up, reclaim the points lead. I feel like we will see a Chevy or Toyota, and more specifically, Hendrick or Gibbs vehicle towards the front, leading the most laps, but Kyle Larson will get it done when it counts. And I think, Tyler, what say you? I think Ford gets it done on qualifying Saturday. It seems like they have 1.5 mile super speedway type of racetracks figured out. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a Ford driver on pole for the race on Sunday.
Yeah, I very well could see that. I very well could. Anything else in news and notes, or are we ready to get to the mailbag?
We're ready to get to the mailbag, Tyler. What do you got this week?
All right, let's get to the mailbag. It's time to touch our bags and put our sack up on today's show and get to our mailbag segment that we bring each and every week. You can email us, davidstarpodcast@gmail.com. Also, Star Podcasts on X and on Facebook as well. That's where you can reach out to us there with your questions each and every week here on Let's Go Racing. Dom, our first question in the mailbag this week. This one comes from Tiffany. Tiffany wants to know, guys, what are your plans for the summer? Dom, we'll start with you.
Great question, Tiffany. So summer plans include spending time with family and making the most out of that. So making little trips where we can, just spending as much time as we can at home, to maybe taking some family trips as well, out of town and out of state. So that'll be a lot of fun. And gosh, definitely try to get to a few NASCAR races throughout the summer and cover those. So I definitely try to stay busy. And plus, Tyler, I think I was telling you off air that we've planted grass in the backyard and we're trying to get all that done. So I've become I'm going to call myself a pseudo handyman. I'm no way able to say I know a lot of stuff on that kind of thing. It's been a quick learning curve and a slow learning curve at that to learn how a lot of the stuff inside the home, outside the home works, but nonetheless a lot of fun planting grass, watering, and moving gravel and working, kind of getting your hands dirty. So a lot of stuff like that will keep me busy over the summer. But Tyler, I know you do it right every summer, and those that have been following the show know you dub it as the Summer of Jones, and David loves to give you crap. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to sink that low and give you crap on it today,
Okay.
this week's show. But tell us, what exactly is there a Summer of Jones planned this week?
Yes. So this is the 8th anniversary edition of the Summer of Jones. Even in 2020, the Summer of Jones still happened. In fact, it made a stop in New Mexico, and Don was a part. But we're all fired up around here for the Summer of Jones. I'm planning. I haven't even told you this yet. Friend of the show, Jonathan Feld, and I were looking at going to the Nashville race at the end of June. Spending a weekend out there. Also, I'm going to be in Phoenix. For a week here at the end of July. So just a couple things here and there. Certainly excited for what's ahead. The Summer of Jones. There's no summer like the Summer of Jones, and certainly looking forward to it all, and looking forward to getting things started this weekend. So that's what's going on for me. Tiffany, thanks for the question there. Dom, I have a question for you, my friend.
Okay, all right.
We'll end the mailbag on this. So at the time of this recording, it is the night before my 28th birthday. By the time you're listening to this, I'll be 28 years old. Dom, at one point in time, you were 28 years old. What do I need to know about turning 28 here? I feel like this is the first one that's kind of hit me that, like, oh crap, I'm 2 years away from 30 now. What do I need to know about going into year 28 here?
Dude, that's a great question, and by the time you all listen, happy belated Tyler birthday wishes here. But no, I think you just got to live every day, live in the moment, and you do a really good job of doing that. Live
every day like it's your last.
Or like David Starr would say, live every day like it's your birthday. Yes. I think that's a great piece of advice that man has given us over the years, and I really don't think that rings true more so as you get older, because man, you really count your blessings. And on one hand, Tyler, I'm sure you feel the same way, where, I'm getting older. I'm turning another year older. But then you look, too, and I'm sure we all know people that haven't had the privilege to celebrate that other birthday. And some people's journeys stop sooner rather than others. And I think back to losing a classmate when I was just out of college, and he's forever going to be 22 years old. So you try to live for those people. You try to think on those kind of things. But yeah, not to get dark or morbid, but it's life, and life happens. And I would say, my friend, you just got to live every day like you mean it, and to make the most out of every opportunity you get, which I think, I have no doubt that you do that already. But man, enjoy that 28th birthday, man. I'd love to be 28 again. I turned 30 earlier this year, and I have that same internal battle, like, wow, another decade, but have that privilege to celebrate that birthday with family and friends. So keep living, keep making the most out of those opportunities, and just to live for all those people that you can.
I got to live every day for Dominic Aragon. That's that. I wake up every morning like, how can I make Dominic proud today? Like that's how I wake up every day. Like not really. I'm just making him feel good, but you know what I mean, folks.
Well, you did make me feel good there, but yes, no, you make me proud, Tyler, with a lot that you do, a lot of inspiring things, and I think you look at your story, small town kid like me, and you grab life by the horns, and you want an opportunity, you kind of go make a way of making it happen, and you finding your way and making things happen and figuring things out along the way. So no, I'm happy for you. It's going to be a fun birthday celebration, and gosh, I wish I could celebrate it there with you in the flesh, but
yes.
No, man.
Well, I will see you later on, a part of the Summer of Jones this year, another summer for you, that you've been a part of this a long time coming now.
Yeah. I look forward to seeing you this summer. It will happen in some way, shape, or form. And I was telling Tyler, guys, I think we all need to get more of this, more people behind this. But the Summer of Jones tour has been going on for a while now. I think we need to get some tour shirts made, like kind of like, how like everybody has their favorite band and they have the band tour and like on the back with the dates and the cities and the times, or not even necessarily the times, but the date or date range and the city and state. We need to get some Summer of Jones shirts made. and some retro ones too. So that way there's a lot of merchandise and memorabilia opportunities here.
So a friend of mine had this idea. Jonathan Monk, my former boss, when I did radio in Lawrence, he suggested I need to get rings made, like some cheap rings, whatever, and hand them out to people based on, like, they get a certain number of rings based on years they've been a part of the Summer of Jones. So, like, Dominic, it's been what, 4 or 5 Summer of Joneses for him. So he'd have like 4 or 5 different rings. Like, those are his championship rings that he's been a part of for every Summer of Jones. Like, you've won another title every time you've been a part.
Oh, I could get behind something like that. And I would have to have, man, I'm going to run out on my left hand. So I'm going to have to go to my right hand and have to start putting that finger decorated with rings. And Tyler, you have to start putting them on your toes or something once you get to 11.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So we're going to come up with something. But the Summer of Jones is here. Another year is here, year 28. I'm getting old, but life is.
You are.
Life is still.
You are, but I'm older. So if you ever need to feel better about yourself, I'll just know that I'm always a couple of years older than you. But I got to ask you too, a follow up on the Summer of Jones stuff on the mailbag segment here. What is the preferred drink of choice for the Summer of Jones?
Oh man, there's so many different directions you can go. I mean, if I'm having an alcohol beverage, I love me a ranch water, which is tequila and Topo Chico and Tajin, and it's very good. I do love also. You'll appreciate this. I know you're a Blue Moon guy. One of the things I get at this place here in Dallas called Katie Trail Ice House, what they call the summer beer. And when I'm drinking a summer beer, that means the Summer of Jones is here. The summer beer it's Blue Moon with ice and an orange, and they add a couple other things to it. But I mean, it just hits you like, yeah, summertime's arrived. So that's one for me. Love me a summer beer. I can't drink, Dob. One of the things I've been doing since I lost all this weight is I gave up regular pop. I'm drinking, whether it's Diet Pepsi or Coke Zero or Coke Zero or Dr. Pepper Zero. So my Dr. Pepper addiction has slowed down. So I guess I can't include Dr. Pepper like I normally would.
There you go. Maybe Dr. Goodwin, Ollie Pop, old partners of the show, some Dr. Goodwin in your life for Summer Jones might be the solution there.
That might be. Dom, what's going on with you this weekend, man?
This weekend, I'll be spending it at home with the family and, of course, helping our team out with remote coverage at theracingexperts.com. We're going to have Joe Larquente out there for us this weekend. And, oh, man, I'm going to get killed on this, Tyler. I'm slipping on our second guy we have out there. No. You know what? No, I'm actually okay. It's just Joe this weekend out there for us this weekend. So Joe will be out there, and Jonathan Phil, myself, and our team will be helping remote coverage with this weekend. How about you?
Just kind of keeping things low key here. After the birthday celebrations and everything, I'll be staying in town this weekend and just kind of enjoying myself from here. I haven't had a weekend where I wasn't with family or traveling or working in about 6 or 7 weeks. So I just need a weekend at home to myself. So that's what I'm going to do this weekend. Just kind of relax, get some R&R, and then we'll be back at it next week. So that's what I got going on. Should be a lot of fun with that. And David, I believe he's got a racing school going on this weekend there at Texas Motor Speedway. So check that out, teamtexas.com. Dominic, we'll put the checker flag out on this edition of Let's Go Racing. We'll see you right back here next week. Subscribe to the show. New episodes out each and every week. Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review or don't leave us one at all. Hit us up on social media at Star Podcasts on X and Facebook. Also by email, davidstarpodcast@gmail.com. For Dominic Aragon, David Starr, our entire crew, Tyler Jones, thanks so long. It's been another edition of Let's Go Racing. We'll see you next week.